All right, and welcome to the first online lecture of social psych. I'm really excited to teach this course. One thing we need to know about social psych is that it is all around us, and that's what makes social psychology really cool. And Psych 214 should be your first introduction to that. In Gen Psych, you may have had a chapter devoted to this, and it really only superficially discussed important topics or studies. But this one is going to be this class is going to be a much more in-depth, elongated version of some of the cool topics that social psychology covers. So we're going to cover things like attraction, aggression, prejudice, priming. We're going to talk about a lot of cool things. And what they all have in common is it's all about social psychology. And let's talk about it. So social psychology is how the social situation, the things that are around you, influence your behavior. And so the formal definition is going to be right here on your screen, and it's going to be all about how people think and feel and how they're influenced by other people around them. Now, this definition may seem pretty broad, and that's because it has to be. If you look at social psychology as a whole, we're going to cover a lot of topics, and once again, that they all have in common is that the situation around you influences how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. So social psychologists, what they've done is they've separated the social psychology into different kind of classifications, and you can see them below on your screen. And in these classifications, what you have here is you have the topics we're going to talk about. The way this course is segmented is we're going to talk about social thinking, and that's going to be things like attitudes, things like the attributions we make about other people's behaviors, and that's called social thinking. Social influence is how your behaviors are influenced by the situation. So that would be if you have a lot of people watching you, how is that going to influence your behavior? Or what does growing up in the United States versus, let's say, China, what does that have to do with how you think and feel and behave? And then finally, relations. This relates to how people engage with other people. We're going to talk about prejudice, attraction, aggression, and helping. I'm not going to test you on, where do these topics fall, but I wanted you to get an idea of just how diverse social psychology is. Now, and here's what we always have to remember. This is the thing we're going to come back to time and time again, is that it's the situation, the social environment that is around you that influences you. All right, and that's what's going to make it different from a lot of other topics. So social psych is different from some of these other fields. For example, sociology, they're very related. We talk about very similar topics, but they deal with macro levels of explanation. So let me give you an example of that. So sociology, they would look at how poverty rates influence, let's say, violent crime. Now, as a psychologist, we can't look at those things the way a sociologist would, because what we want to know as a psychologist is how does the person feel, not the group of people as a whole, if that makes sense. So sociology, what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out a very important question. Does poverty level relate to violence? How a social psychologist would look at that is they would look at an individual's socioeconomic status and see how well that correlates to things like aggression and violence. All right, so very different in that case. And so they deal with a very macro level, these kind of overarching ideas where they group people into classifications that serve a bigger purpose at a macro level. Social psychology doesn't do that, although we do talk about similar topics. Personality, now this is going to be in psychology, and what personality does is it's trying to predict your behavior from your traits, or what makes you who you are. An example of that would be like the Big Five, where you have extroversion, neuroticism, openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness. I'm hoping you've heard about these in Gen Psych or your other classes. And these Big Five traits, they make up who you are. You are who you are. And social psychology, though, Um, the influence is more on the situation, not who you are as a person. So in my lab, I study aggression, and in my lab, I randomly assign people to be provoked or not. And we do this ethically, and we do this by giving them, by some participants, they get false feedback on an essay they've written. They're told it's a terrible test, a terrible essay. It's not written well. It's one of the worst things I've ever read. And other participants are not given that information. And what we want to do is determine, does that provocation influence your aggression? Now, notice how I didn't say anything about your personal constitution or your personality. Although we know it's important, it is not what a pure social psychologist deals with. In all honesty, contemporary social psychologists, and I do consider myself that, recognizes that the personality of your personality and the situation that we're putting you in likely interact together. So in the case with the provocation, people high on trait aggression, so really just aggressive people, they are probably going to take that kind of feedback, that provoking feedback, a lot worse than someone who does not have high levels of trait aggression, right? But anyway, that's what separates personality from psychology from social psychology, is the emphasis on your traits. Now, one thing I do want to say is that, once again, a lot of personality and social psych are integrated. So our biggest journals that social psychologists publish in often will have the term personality. For example, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin. Those are two of our greatest journals, and a lot of graduate programs combine social and personality psych. So there's a lot of overlap, but they just focus on different causes for behavior. And finally, fields like the hard sciences, and I know you can't see it, but I'm putting it in like quotes, hard sciences. What they do is they're going to focus on DNA and things like that. And one thing I want to say about that is, recently there is a lot of overlap now between social psychology and biology, where what we're able to do is put people in fMRI machines and then evaluate them based on some situation. For example, I saw an article recently that had kids in an fMRI machine able to watch TV somehow, I think with like special glasses. And what you could do experimentally is see, you put these kids in this fMRI machine with these glasses on to watch TV, and you can see what pieces of their brain light up based on the content of that TV show or whatever. And psychologists are starting to do that now, especially social psychologists. We're starting to integrate this idea into social psychology as a whole. So what we're doing here is and the point of this slide is to show you that social psychology deals with a lot of social issues, and it's integrating parts of different fields, cross-disciplinary and within the discipline, to try to predict behavior the best, because ultimately that's what we want, is to predict behavior. Now, one thing I do want to say is that what we have to understand about psychology is that first of all, I'll just bluntly say, we can never prove anything. All right, we can never ever prove anything. And why we can't prove things is because of the fact that we are dealing with humans. All right. So for example, if I were to show you a study that said participants in this study are attracted to people who are different from them, so like opposites attract. If I was to show you that, I'm sure you could think of 1,000 examples of where people who are dating or married or whatever, they are very similar to each other. All right, so just because a study publishes an effect doesn't mean that it is proven. So we can never prove anything. It's because we're dealing with people and everyone's different. In the provocation example I gave before with the essay, some people are going to take that essay feedback to be very harsh. And other people are going to be like, yeah, I really don't know how to write. I'm going to take this constructively. So we can never prove anything. And where that puts psychology is in a weird spot. And so psychology and the social sciences as a whole has been called the soft sciences, because we can't prove anything. And you can see on this graphic here, on the bottom here, you have what's called the elemental explanation, where you are dealing with facts and laws and proofs. For example, physics, chemistry, biology, math. It's pretty clear. Like, you can prove gravity. All right. If I dropped a pencil, gravity exists. And if I created a vacuum where there was no gravity, the pencil would float. There, I just proved it. Gravity is proven. All right. But as you start to work your way up from elemental to integrative, you really have to take the ideas that we present with a grain of salt. And so part of this course is about being a critical thinker as much as it is about learning social psych. So, if I were to say that this really cool study found that opposites attract, that's not a proof. That's just for that sample, for that particular study, for that manipulation or measure or whatever. It just happened that those results worked out. And so as you can see, as you're working your way up, you can see it goes from physics right here, right? And then it goes more and more and more integrative until you get to theology. Now, theology and philosophy, these things, what they have in common is they're going to ask questions that no one knows the answer to. Like, what is our purpose here on earth? Is there a God, if you believe in that kind of thing? What does it mean to be an evil person? All right. These things we can't answer. We don't know the answer. Now, we can think about them. We can, for theologists, we can say, what does, the deity you pray to, what do they think? And you can see social psychology fits kind of right here. So we're a little more scientific than the philosophers and the theologians. We use the scientific method. We do rigorous experimental studies, but we're not as low as the chemistry, physics, biology group because we can't deal with laws and proofs just like they can. And that's what's going to make us different. All right, now as you can see here, social psychology is one away from psychology because, once again, social psychology deals with topics that are quote-unquote sociological, although, as I argued, they just measure and think about them differently. And other branches of psychology, like neuroscience, for example, they are more biology-oriented, even though social psychology is starting to dabble in that. All right, so you can see here, this is the way it works. So this is what this graphic demonstrates, but I do want you to know that we are taking the scientific method. We do rigorous studies where we have statistics and data and things like that, but we just can't prove anything. All right, I think that is going to be it for the first video. So we're not done with the first lecture, though, so as soon as I get this uploaded, then I will start the next one.